I've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender more times than I reasonably admit, studied the lore, the cultural references, the behind-the-scenes interviews, and here's what I keep coming back to. Most people finish the show thinking Ozai was the villain. He wasn't. He was a product. The real villain was an idea, one that had been quietly building for a century before he ever sat on that throne, and it didn't die when he fell. By the end of this, you'll understand why the Fire Nation's ordinary citizens weren't evil, and why that makes them more unsettling than if they were. Why the most dangerous weapon in that world wasn't firebending, and why the real tragedy isn't Zuko's scar. This isn't a complicated thesis, it's a pattern. Once you see how the machine actually worked, how a whole society got shaped to believe conquest was kindness, you can't unsee it. Let's start with something the show tells you in episode 1, if you're listening for it. Aang wakes up into a world at war, but the war isn't framed as Fire Nation bad. Not really. It's framed as something went wrong, something shifted. And it happened long before Ozai, long before Aslan, long before anyone still alive made a single deliberate choice. That framing matters more than anything else in the series. It's where the whole thing is hiding. Here's what the show quietly establishes about ordinary Fire Nation people in year 100 of the war. Most of them believed they were the good guys, not performing goodness, genuinely feeling it. They were taught that Fire Lord Sozin shared the Fire Nation's era of prosperity with a world that was struggling, that the war was generosity, a gift, delivered sometimes with fire, but a gift nonetheless. They weren't pretending, they meant it. Think about something you believed completely as a child. A rule at home, a version of your country's history, a reason why certain things were done a certain way. You didn't question it. Why would you? The people telling you had no visible reason to lie. That's where this always starts. Not with force, but with trust. With something handed down before you were old enough to form the question of whether it was true. In Fire Nation classrooms, children learned a specific version of history, Sozin's Comet, the air nomad genocide. Gone, replaced with a narrative about progress spreading to a grateful world. Zuko was taught these things by his own tutors. His own family reinforced them. This wasn't a government hiding truth from a resistant population. The population wasn't resisting. They trusted the story completely, because the story was all they'd ever been given. Resistance makes propaganda fragile. Belief makes it permanent. Here's what's interesting though. From outside the Fire Nation, it's clearly an empire built on conquest. From inside, it felt like purpose. Fire Nation soldiers didn't think they were invaders. They thought they were builders. Occupied Earth Kingdom cities weren't occupied. They were developed. That gap between how a thing looks from the outside and how it feels from within is exactly where ideology hides. Right in that gap. From the people living inside it most of all. So ask yourself, what story were you handed that you never actually chose? Not a lie anyone told you out of malice. Just a picture of how the world works, absorbed before you had the tools to examine it. Fire Nation citizens didn't choose their beliefs any more than children choose their first language. It was already inside them before they could form the question. That's not an excuse for what followed. That's the mechanism. Understanding it is different from forgiving it. There's a difference between pride and nationalism that feels small until you follow the logic all the way through. Pride says, I love where I'm from. Nationalism says, where I'm from deserves more than where you're from. One stops there. The other keeps going, into policy, into expansion, into the idea that your culture's strength is proof of your right to shape everyone else's. The Fire Nation didn't just believe it was strong. It believed that strength was a mandate. Sozin wasn't written as a cartoon monster. His reasoning, if you actually sit with it, is coherent. The Fire Nation had experienced a century of prosperity. He genuinely believed that prosperity could be shared. That's not monstrous on its face. What's monstrous is what comes next, when sharing prosperity becomes the justification for everything that follows. Colonization never starts with, we want your land. Fire Nation schools taught children that their ancestors brought light to a world stumbling in darkness. Exactly what you'd say if you needed that story to last. Imagine you grew up in a country that, compared to its neighbors, had clean water, reliable food, and working infrastructure. And someone in power says we should help them have what we have. Sounds reasonable. So you send aid. Then advisors to manage the aid. Then soldiers to protect the advisors. Then administrators to manage the soldiers. And suddenly you're running someone else's country. You never stop thinking you were helping. Because at the start, you actually were. That's the part that's hard to untangle. Historians call this the civilizing mission. It shows up in British India, French West Africa, the Spanish Americas. Almost identical framing every time. We're bringing progress to people who don't have it yet. Avatar's writers knew exactly what they were referencing. They weren't making a fantasy war story. They were making a story about how empire justifies itself from the inside, in good faith, with full sincerity. Next time someone says, we're just trying to help them, it's worth asking what comes with the help. Zuko is the most important character in the show. Not because his redemption arc is satisfying, though it is. It's because he's the only one who grew up fully inside the Fire Nation's belief system, and then had to watch it collapse from the inside out. He didn't get to learn the truth from a safe distance. He had to unlearn it while still standing in the middle of it. That's a specific kind of pain. The show doesn't rush it. The moment that cracks him isn't a battle, it's a letter. He finds out what his great-great-grandfather actually did, not the version his family taught him. And what stops him isn't the scale of it. It's this. The man who ordered it didn't think he was doing something terrible. The letter isn't written by a monster. It's written by someone who went to his grave believing he did right. That's the part Zuko can't recover from. That's what breaks something open. Zuko doesn't leave the Fire Nation because he figures out it was wrong. He leaves because he can't stop feeling like something is wrong. There's a difference. Logic didn't break his loyalty. His instincts did. He kept reaching for the version of himself his father needed, and kept finding it didn't fit. That dissonance is what ideology does to people who can't stop thinking. It doesn't shatter you in one moment. It grinds, quietly, for years. The show gives you the precise moment. Zuko, face to face with his father, says something like, "We were taught that the Fire Lord was the greatest man in the world." He pauses. "I've come to see my uncle as the greatest man I've ever known." He doesn't fight. He just names what's true. The ideology doesn't collapse in a battle. It collapses in the space between those two sentences. That space is where the whole show lives. So here's the pattern. An ideology doesn't need to be built on evil to produce evil. It needs three things. A story that makes the powerful feel chosen, institutions that repeat that story until it turns invisible, and a generation that grows up breathing it like air. The Fire Nation had all three, and for 100 years, the people inside it had almost no way to see it, because the story was the water they swam in. That's not unusual. That's how it always works. And here's the cruel part. When the war ends, Ozai goes to prison. The story doesn't go with him. Zuko takes the throne and inherits a country full of people who were never taught another way to understand themselves or their history. There's no comet to outrun for that. No final battle. Just the long, grinding work of asking a society to reconsider who it was raised to be. That work doesn't have a clean ending. The show knows this. Avatar doesn't pretend the answer is tidy. It shows you a young man sitting on the throne his grandfather weaponized, trying to build something different with the same people his grandfather shaped. No villain left to defeat. No dramatic arc to close. Just the patient, necessary work of asking people to reconsider who they were told they were. Once you watch the show that way, not as a war story, but as a question about what ideology does to the people inside it, it doesn't leave you. Understanding the Fire Nation won't make Avatar better. You already loved it. But it might make you a sharper watcher, of fiction, of news, of the stories handed to you about who belongs where and why. Ozai wasn't the villain, he was the product. And the ideology that made him didn't need a war to spread, it just needed a classroom.